Hey friends, welcome to the lecture on the IRB application. What I would recommend is devoting a good substantial amount of time to this application. The idea with this is that you want to make sure that the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, has all of the information they need to decide whether or not you should move forward on your study based on ethical guidelines and reasoning. So what I want to do is take a moment to walk you through the application itself, kind of point out some highlights, some potential pitfalls, and hopefully get you started in the right direction on this application. So a couple of things to note. Regardless of your project, if you are writing a thesis at Houston Christian University, you need to make sure that you fill out this application. You cannot receive even one piece of data from a participant without completing this application, submitting it to the IRB, and then getting IRB approval to do so, to continue the research, right? Written approval, to be specific. And the reason for this is because the university wants to make sure that our students are going out there and doing good ethical research and not subjecting themselves or the university in general to potential litigation due to misappropriation or inappropriate research or data collection. So let's start with this. Oh, and one thing too, I want to point out, if you're doing archival study that doesn't actually involve human participants, you still do need to complete this and submit this to the IRB, but the review process is a little bit different. So actually much briefer. So anyway, the IRB application looks like this. It can be found if you go to hbu.edu/IRB. You can find this application and some basic guidelines there, but I've got it pulled up already. So what does it look like? Why does the IRB even exist? Here's some background on it. This is all part of the application that you should read, but don't need to actually fill anything out for. It's got different protocols. The IRB, that no review needed does not pertain to students. So ignore that. Exemption from review, expedited review. You can have a look through these things, but 95% of you will have number 4, being a case of number 4, where you're actually gathering data and you need a full committee review. Usually the IRB has an excellent turnaround time, but I would budget about 2 weeks from initial submission to first decision. The reason why I say first decision is because they might come back and say, you need to revise and resubmit. You have to change a few things. We want these things addressed, and then send it back to us. And there's obviously a small delay between that and when they reconsider. So areas that we need to look at here. To begin with, we need to look at the questions. So this is where the application really starts in earnest. Notice here, name, address, and phone number for the student researcher. So obviously that's where your details will go. The name and title of the faculty researcher. So in this case, it could either be, it's most likely in this case going to already be your professor for this course. If you already have your committee established, then you would put your committee chair on there. And likewise for question 3, including your committee members. If that has not been established yet, you can indicate that this has not yet been established. Program for study for the proposal. In this case, you guys will be doing the MAP program. Department of origin, it's going to be psychology. Title of proposal and date of submission. Date, I don't have to explain. Title, do not just call this thesis, right? They need to know what the research is actually going to be called. So the impact on movies on attention span, or the impact of Red Bull on study quality, or I don't know, whatever. Give it its proper name. The abstract, notice number 7 is the abstract. If you have not written the abstract yet, I would recommend that you write this last in the application, just because I think it's going to help you to move through the application first and get a better idea of what you want the abstract to include and what it needs to say. If you've already written it, great, copy and paste and move it over. A point to that, by the way, you cannot plagiarize on this in that if you've written answers to these questions already, for example, your abstract, you can literally copy your abstract out of your thesis if you've already started writing and drop it in here, and it is not plagiarism. So just an FYI on that. You are using your own work. You don't want to plagiarize from other people's sources, so don't take from someone else's sources and drop it in here and not cite or reference it. Make sure it's still your work, but in this case, it's not plagiarism if you do it for yourself. You are not receiving funds, so the answer to this question will be no. Let me stop here, actually, with question 8. With all questions, rather, excuse me, is you want to make sure you provide complete sentences for your answers. Don't just say no, right? Not that that's not accurate, but what the IRB is really looking for is a good amount of detail, and so they're really going to, you need clarity, right? So don't get in the habit. Don't even answer one of these with just a simple no or yes. Make sure you provide these in complete sentences. I promise it'll make your application review process much easier. Not that they would reject you for a no versus a no funds were received in this, but you get the idea. Number of subjects required. This is probably still a question mark, so I would give them a range. So you might say 100 to 200 or 100 to 150, whatever. Just make sure it is reasonable. Don't be like 1 million, you know, I mean, like, give them a good idea, right? An accurate idea. Types of subjects, you want to be very clear on this because they're going to know, for example, college students. Okay, if they're college students, which ones? Are they from HCU? Are they from U of H? Are they from Rice? Are they from Lone Star? Where are you getting these guys from? Is it only undergrads or are you including grads, right? Are you looking for a specific type of college student? Are you looking for first gens versus non-first gens? Be clear. And the source, this will lead into question 11, the source of the subjects. Where are you going to get them from? So if you're going to get them from HCU, for example, how they would be recruited, for example. So are you going to get them from a, I don't know, I keep looking this way. Are you going to get them from a general psych class? A lot of our students use general psych students for their participants. Fine, just state that, right? Just be very clear. The IRB needs to have all their questions answered even before they have a chance to ask them. How will they be recruited? So who will the subjects be? I know this 12A is going to sound redundant, especially because you just answered 10 and 11. It is okay to repeat yourself in this. They're looking for certain answers to certain questions. Please make sure, don't say see above. Answer the question again. Be as clear as possible. I know it seems redundant and maybe even a little frustrating. You need to do it. We all have to do it. And this application is what faculty members use. So anytime I go to do my own research, I'm utilizing this, right? And I'm answering the questions the exact same way I'm advising you to do it. So it's not like, hey, do as I say, not as I do. I understand. I go through this all the time. 12B, what are you actually, what are your participants going to be experiencing? Level of risk. There's a lecture in this course about risk and research ethics and everything like that. Ideally, you would, if it's true, you would put minimal risk, that they would be subjected to minimal risk. But you also want to be aware what your research could do in terms of triggering people. So a lot of my research looks at things like mass shootings. And not to make a very, very bad pun, but this obviously can trigger people because it's a very sensitive topic and a very, well, it's a very upsetting topic, right? So you got to be aware of this. So don't say that there's minimal risk if you're asking questions about trauma or something kind of controversial, something like that, right? Deception, please don't use deception. Please don't use deception. Please don't use deception. 12E, expected behavior. So this is going to be, you know, they're going to do a 15-minute online survey from SurveyMonkey and da 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 da. So what do you expect them to actually do as part of the study? The subjects need to be debriefed. So I would actually just copy and paste over a paragraph that says this is the script that will be utilized when debriefing the participants. Data storage policy. 12G is going to make a bunch of people have to submit again. Make sure you go back and review this data policy and tell them exactly what they want to hear, that the data is going to be stored in 3 separate locations. One can be with your chair, one can be with the university, the third is with you, but safe under lock and key or password protected computer. Be clear, 3 separate sources or 3 separate storage means, all of which are protected by lock and key and or password protected computer. Okay, make sure you answer this one well. Project is conducted by students. What is the involvement of the faculty advisor? You want to be clear that the faculty advisor is involved in every aspect, from the design to the execution to the analysis to the write-up. Make sure that's very clear. Privacy and anonymity. Obviously, you don't want to ask any questions like, what is your name? Make sure your research is private and anonymous. HBU's initiative. So 10 pillars. Have a look at the 10 pillars and just pick one and say, you know, this seems to be in line with pillar 6 or whatever, and say why, right? It's going to vary based on your project. The informed consent is down below. We'll talk about that in a moment. Make sure you use their template for an informed consent. Obviously, for 16, you want to include anything the participants will see, whatever questionnaires, whatever demographics they're going to answer, include that in there. And then city training too, make sure you have your city training up to date. This course has the link for your city training. Make sure you complete that. You should have completed it in 6320. If you have not yet, reach out to your professor. They can point you in the right direction. Got to include it. And of course, you'll sign right there. So you'll sign and send it to your supervisor, and they'll sign as well. Here is the consent form that you need to use. Use this template. Let me say that again slower. Use this template. This is what the IRB wants to see. This is the kind of standard form they want you to utilize. Fill it out. So obviously the protocol title is your research, your name, so on and so forth. Make sure you complete this, right? And there's all sorts of aspects of this consent form that you have to fill in. So each time you see a subheading, why is the study being done? What will happen? Blah, blah, blah. Answer these. There are instructions in blue. You can delete those once you complete this, right? But just be clear, these all have to be completed because this is the consent form that your participants will need to complete before they participate in your research, regardless of whether or not you're actually having them fill out something pencil and paper or if it's an online survey. This will just be put on a digital form when you go to complete the research. So make sure this is thoroughly answered. Okay? And don't, by the way, expect this to be like you write it once and it's done. You're going to write this and, of course, send it to your professor, but then you also send it to your committee members. And they can provide you feedback and say, oh, change this, add that, tweak this, and then you submit it. So this is a very iterative process. Don't expect to be able to just sit down and be done with it. Blah, blah, blah. That's where they fill out their information when they go to participate in your research. There is a place here, there's also a research assent. So there's consent and assent. So if you're doing participants who are minors, this is what you'd also have to include. But I would really strongly, very much, please don't use minors. Okay, it adds another layer of complication to the process, and you really don't have the time to get through a study that involves minors. I say this from experience. My entire doctorate utilized minors as participants. Please try and avoid that. And yeah, so there's the remainder of it. Hold on just a second. Sorry, there was a cat that was about to climb up my leg, and he weighs about 15 pounds, so I would have screamed. Okay, so there we go, and that's it. That's it. So some notes about this too. As I said, I hate to sound like a broken record, but as much detail as possible. Basically, you want to leave the IRB with no questions about what you're doing. They would need to know exactly what you're doing, why, how it will be performed, what the participants will experience. Be honest and be detailed. Ideally, you would give them everything they need where they can look at what you're doing and say, yes, this is a good study. And they always provide some feedback. They might say, hey, be careful about this part of it, or make sure you do this or whatever. But it's meant to be a constructive process, that your research will be better after you apply and after they consider it. But as I said, do not skimp on the details. Proofread like crazy. Like crazy. They hate seeing typos. Everyone hates seeing typos. But that can really make your application look very poorly considered and poorly thought out. So proofread, detail, and in the end, you'll have an excellent application and be well on your way to conducting your research.